his kingdom in your lifetime and in your days and the lifetime of all the house of Israel. Amen. May his great name be blessed forever and all time. Blessed and praised, glorified and exalted, raised and honored, uplifted and lauded be the name of the Holy One. Blessed be he, beyond any blessing, song, praise, and consolation. Utter in the world and say, Amen. Okay, you may be seated. We'll finish up on page 586. All right. So last week, Israel leaves Egypt after the death of the firstborn. And Passover is instituted as a memorial service, as a memorial offering. And it goes through the rules and regulations. Now, as we know, the first Passover was just for in Egypt, when they're in Egypt, to put the blood on the doorpost and to stand ready to go. But then God further goes on and instructs them that when you get into the land, then you're to do it a different way. Okay? And that each household is to have a lamb, and if there's not enough people in one household, they're to get together with another family to eat the lamb. So from there, the angel of death goes through, passed over the houses of Israel, and those people who weren't Israel, who believed and obeyed, who did the same thing, they didn't have death in their house. And they left with Israel, as it says, a mixed company of people with Israel, not just the sons of Abraham, the children of Abraham, but also other people from the nations, other slaves from Nubian slaves, Libyan slaves, other African and other Middle Eastern people that Egypt had conquered and turned into slaves as well. And so they left with Israel, a mixed company. And as we read last week too, that God has a promise for us, that where's that now? In Yechezkiel or Ezekiel chapter 47, verse 21, this is the territory you are to divide among the tribes of Israel. You are to divide it by lot as an inheritance both to you and to the foreigners living among you, who give birth to children living among you. For you they are to be no different from the native born among the people of Israel. They are to have an inheritance with you among the tribes of Israel. You are to give the foreigner an inheritance in the territory of the tribe with whom he is living, says Adonai. So we see that part where Israel comes out with a mixed multitude. They become part of Israel. And the promise God gives us in Ezekiel, the same thing in the future, that those Gentiles who take hold of Israel and believe the promises of Moses, and in this case, believe in what Yeshua has done for us as the second Messiah. Moses was like the first Messiah. And it's interesting that his name is Moshe, right? Moshe, and that Yeshua is known as Mashiach. Moshe means drawn from. Mashiach means anointed one. But they have some of the same letters in them. So it's really interesting there. And so it is only through, it's not through the descendancy of Israel do we get into the kingdom, because we know there's a lot of Jewish people who don't believe. They claim the title Jew when it suits them, but other than that, they don't do anything for God. They don't study Torah. They don't walk in His ways. They walk in the way of the world. And of course, there's Christians that do the same thing. So when Yeshua came, He didn't come to create what was called Christianity. He came to work within what God had already set up, and that just as the Gentiles took hold of Israel, left Egypt, the idea is for Gentiles to take hold of Israel and to be a part of the world to come, okay? To join Israel with that. Be one people, okay? And that's what the promise is. we have to accept what Yeshua has done for us in our place. He walked the way we need to walk. He followed what God instructed for us to do, you know. And Rav Shaul, his gospel is a little bit different from that of what Yeshua said. It's the same in regards to repent and turn back to God, but it's also for the Gentile that you don't have to become Jewish to be saved. And we know that Rav Shaul and many of the other apostles, some of them disagreed, but when James, the brother of Yeshua, Yaakov, the brother of Yeshua, who is the leader of the Messianic community in Jerusalem and of the others, through prayer, sided with Rav Shaul that, yeah, you need to go to the Gentiles and bring this to them. But for the Jews, you know, we're going to continue with what we're doing here. Because as Rav Shaul said, to the Jew first and then also to the Gentile. Okay? And so it wasn't, and at that time, for a long time, the Messianic movement in the Jewish community was no different than the Orthodox or anything like that. They were considered to be just another sect of Judaism. But the thing is, with the Messianics, they were closely related to the Pharisees. And that's another reason why the Sadducees didn't like them, because they were heavily aligned with the same beliefs as the Pharisees. Why? Because Yeshua was a Pharisee. Yeshua was a Pharisee. All his teachings, all his beliefs and stuff come from the house of the Pharisees. Mostly he sided with the house of Hillel, but some of his teachings he did agree with Shammai, who was very strict in his interpretation. But there's only a few things where he agreed with him on that, you know. And then we do know that if you look at a woman to lust at her in your heart, that's committing adultery. That was teaching by Shammai. To say to your brother, "You fool," is to be the same as murder. Okay, and there's different things too, just a few. But he sided with the Pharisees. He also sided with the traditions, with what they call the traditions. But a tradition that was used that caused the written Torah to be made less. That's where he tried to fix it. Tried to say, hey, no, don't do that. Yes, you know, you tithe cumin and thyme and all these different things, and that's great. But it's not what the Torah says. But it's okay that you do that. That's fine. But you're forgetting the weightier stuff, which is the Torah itself, what God said to tithe, which was the 7 species that are in Israel. Those were to be tithed. But everything else wasn't a requirement, but it's fine if you do. There's nothing wrong with that, but just don't overstep what the Torah says, you know? And that's what he was all about. And what we see here is that after Pharaoh, and Egypt is the world, okay? It represents the world, even our modern world today. And the plagues on Egypt are the 7 years of tribulation. That's what it represents. These plagues and stuff will be coming through there. And that's an interesting thing. You know, how long did these plagues and stuff go on? It doesn't really say. Some say this went on for a couple of years. It wasn't all in just a month or a couple months, you know. It went on maybe for several months, maybe even up to a year. We don't know. But at the end of that year, at the end of that time, Pharaoh finally released Israel. The world finally released. And the plagues came, and the world suffered because of pride. Man can do it. Man can fix anything they put their mind to, which in a sense, in a godly way, that's true. But when it's used in a selfish way, and that's what we get from our government, that we got one side that wants us to rely strictly on the government and to do away with relying on God. That's one of the oldest things that we see even in the Bible. The kings and the leadership of these other countries said, no, rely on us, we'll take care of you, we're God, right? We're in the place of God, Don't be praying. Just like with Daniel, when the men of the government were jealous of Daniel because of his wisdom and stuff, they asked Nebuchadnezzar, say, hey, let's make a law that no, for a week or whatever it is, that nobody can petition their God for anything, but only you. Right? And of course, Daniel prayed 3 times a day. And so when he did that, they arrested him. He broke the king's law, and the king realized that it was a trick. And he was sad. He didn't want to do it, but he had to follow the law. And so he threw him into a den of lions, right, who had been starved to the point of almost to the point where they're almost to kill themselves, right? They threw him in there, and yet he survived. Matter of fact, it says that an angel appeared and kept them at bay. And the next day when Nebuchadnezzar went to check on him, he was still alive. What did he do? He threw those government guys into there, instead. And immediately they killed him. But the thing is that we have to understand that this world is like Egypt. It's trying to, and it's like Rome as well, where Rome allowed Judaism to go to do its thing, but if you, who were a Gentile, a God-fearer, were to, it was against the law for a God-fearer to be part of Judaism unless they converted, okay? And that meant that you could be charged with the crime of atheism. Now today we think of atheism as not believing in God. That's really not what it's about. To be charged with the crime of atheism in Rome was to refuse to take part in the Roman festivals, offerings to Caesar and the other gods and so forth, and to partake in the festivals that they had, their holy days. And that's what we read in Galatians, is that when it's talking about holy days, holy weeks, months, years, okay? It's talking about Roman pantheon, the Roman paganism, not the church likes to use that and say, oh, see, it's talking about Sabbaths and festivals and so forth, right? It's not talking about it. Galatians was written to Gentiles, to God-fearing Gentiles, and Gentiles who were turning to the Messiah to become part of Israel as Gentiles, okay? Now, Israel has a different position there, just like the priests have a position that God gave them. Then you have the Levites, and then you have Israel. They all have different parts, but Israel can't do what the Levites are doing, okay, because the Levites have a special calling. But the Levites can't do what the priests can do because the priests have a separate calling, okay? And so the Gentiles can't do what Israel does. I mean, they can't. I mean, it's fine for Gentiles to keep the Torah and stuff as much as they want, but they're not. Their requirement isn't that. There are requirements in the Torah that are for Gentiles, but not the whole thing, not everything. Okay, they can't become Levites. They can't become priests. Okay. Now, in the time, in the Messianic era, it says that God will choose from the nations those to join the priesthood of Aaron from the nations. Not going to be that many, but there will be those, okay? And when it talks about us being a kingdom of priests and kings, it doesn't say kingdom of priests and kings. It says a kingdom of priests, that we will be like priests. We will, in the Messianic era, we will be teaching God's instructions, and we'll be living by them, and we'll be a light for the rest of the nations that survive after Yeshua comes. Okay, but in the world to come, all that ends. The renewed covenant that's talked about in Jeremiah and other places will come into effect. Right now, up until even till the end of the 1,000-year reign of the Messiah, the Torah is in effect. Okay, but after the 1,000 years and the final battle at Armageddon, then comes the world to come. And in that day, it says that no one will need to teach anybody because everybody's going to know. And not only that, but it's going to be written in our hearts and on our minds. I mean, it's going to be a part of us. It's like DNA. It'll be like DNA. It'll be in our structure. We won't be able to. Right now, sinning is easy, but it's hard to do what's good, right? We see that. It's hard to do what's good. Even little kids, we got to train them. Why? Because it's in them to do that stuff, even though maybe they don't know about it. That's why God talks about a time of when they become accountable, okay? Up until that time, we're responsible for their spiritual understanding, their teaching, okay? And that's why we need to raise them. That's why God says, even in the prayers that we said today, God talks about us raising our children correctly. In this, teach your children when you're on the way, when you're sitting down, when you lay down, and when you get up. That we need to be teaching them, that we should have His Word on our hearts all the time. Now, it's not easy, we know that, but it's something that we can try and do, teach our kids the right way to do things, right? So that's called discipline, right? Discipline is not punishment. Discipline is a way of teaching. Disciples were students. Talmidim is the Hebrew word for students, okay? So they were students. They were learning. And even our children, our ministry starts at home with our children, okay? Raising them in the way that they should go, okay? Doesn't mean when they get older they're going to continue in that. They're going to go their way many times. I did. I know my own children have done so. But they know the truth. And, as it says in Proverbs, how's it go? Don't spare the rod. No, how's it? Don't spare the rod. No, how's it go? Yeah, I know. But it's the way you should go when he is old, he shall not depart from. That's the one I'm looking for. There's two different ones. Yeah.
Well, but spare the rod for the child. It's more along the line, if you do not discipline, you hate your child. And discipline is not whacking them with the rod.
No.
It's
nudging them. Right. It's nudging them. Or sometimes it's getting their attention, just like a mule. Right. Sometimes you got to get the mule's attention to get him to do what he needs to do. And sometimes we can be hard-headed, and we need to get hit on the head too. Get, hey, I'm trying to get your attention.
That's what we don't want to cause brain damage.
No. Just like God did with me when I was so going forward and stuff, but I left my wife behind and she didn't know what to do and stuff like that, and finally God slapped me. I was going forward, but she was left behind. She didn't know where to go. She didn't know what to do. She had a lot of issues with where I was going. But God had to slap me in the head and say, hey, like one of those Gibbs slaps. Hey, get with the program. Yeah. Ministry, I didn't just call you to the ministry, I called you and your family. And that's the truth. Anybody who says otherwise, oh, God called me to the ministry. How about your wife? Well, she can help. No. We work together, and you guys have seen this. We work together, even in our studies and stuff.
So much was taken out of the King James Bible is because then you can kind of push somebody towards a wrong interpretation.
Yeah. So as we see here, Pharaoh now repents of his decision to let Israel go, right? He repents. Israel's going. Not only is Israel going, but many of his slaves who are from other nations, believed in Moses, go with him. Go with him to freedom, to worship the true God, the one true God. And he goes so far. Now, I know it reads in here that God hardened his heart. Well, the thing is that God doesn't really harden our hearts. It's already here. He just allows us to do it because he's a righteous God. It would, freedom. And he gave him a thing. He went through these plagues and he refused to believe. Well, now Pharaoh has no choice because he repents and he gets his army up and going, and they overtake him or get close to him, and then God does a wonderful thing, a miracle. I mean, the children of Israel still complaining. Now what are we going to do? They can't, God has delivered them from Egypt already, and they complain. Now what are we going to do? You brought us out here to die? Why don't you leave us alone in Egypt, where we had good food and it was better to be slaves than to die here? And there's a story of Naaman, who is we hear about him later. And Moses is standing there telling everybody, see what God's going to do for you. And Naaman, he heads right out into the water, going all the way up, because he believes God. And as he gets out to where the water is up to his nose, the water splits. It's almost a story like what Abraham did when he was heading to Mount Moriah with Isaac and the two servants, that the adversary caused the river to overflow large, and Abraham knew it was the adversary, and so he kept walking, and as it got up to his mouth, then the water receded, and he was able to get up to Mount Moriah. So we see, God's miracles in this, and the people are like, wow.
Make sure that you point out that these aren't actual in the scripture. They were commentary.
Well, they're not actually in the scripture. They're commentary from other Jewish sources, but they all play a part in this.
Yeah.
And so the people are whining. I mean, whiners. We think that the generations we have today are whiners, but these guys were whining. They've seen all this stuff. God's taking care of them, and all this, and they're still whining. Little whiners. No, not really. That's probably what we would do, but the thing is that they're whining, and God, and even Moses is whining, and God says, what are you doing? Keep going. What are you crying to me for? You know what you need to do, right? And so he does it, and the water splits. Now, I always like it when I hear these scientists say, well, it couldn't be the Red Sea, because that would be impossible for the water to split. So it had to be the reed area, the swampy area just north of that.
Was it low tide?
Yeah, and that it was at low tide, and so the water receded. Well, how did they walk on dry land then?
And not just that, there was the one story, I think you were going to tell it, like, this one kid was arguing with a science teacher. They're arguing with a science teacher or whatever, and she was like, it was a low tide at the time. The kid said, well, Baruch Hashem. It's like, why are you saying that for? He drowned the party in 1 inch of water.
Yeah. That's another way to look at it, right? But we do know that it was the sea. We know where the crossing of the Red Sea is from the Sinai Peninsula into the Arabian Peninsula. Okay? It wasn't into the Sinai Peninsula from Egypt, I'm sorry to say. It went up, down into the Sinai Peninsula, onto the side of the Red Sea is, where the one arm of the Red Sea is, and and if you take a look, you'll see they've found Egyptian artifacts of chariots and armor and different things in that spot, that it comes up to make a natural bridge. It's still deep, but it comes up. It makes like a bridge all the way across if you were to get the water out of there. Okay? And there's a big beach there that it's like, where are you going to fit these many people in there? And what's interesting is that they followed a dry riverbed that went right in there. And what did it say? It said there was mountains on the other side and the sea on that side. Well, it's the only spot where you got mountains over here, and the Egyptians that are behind them in that riverbed.
And I was going to say, it has been shown that if a strong wind comes, it can force water back on a natural land bridge underneath water and push that water back and split it. And so if you have a strong enough east wind from God, which is a supernatural wind,
however many feet it was, yeah. And
it's just this inability to see beyond something that, really themselves.
Yeah.
Still God's hand, or else
Still
it would have
God's
been
hand.
dry.
Yeah, it wouldn't have been. Yeah, that's the other thing. It was dry land.
Wind may have pushed
The waters, but
Right, but where was that coming from?
Yeah,
You know,
and
it
yet-
was rock.
yeah. And see, the thing is that it was dry land for Israel, but what was it for the Egyptians? It was mud and stuff like that. They couldn't move, right? And it says too here that the waters were walled up on both sides. Walled up. You know? It's not a tide went out.
No.
It's the waters were walled up on both sides. And I like that movie, The Prince of Egypt, where it shows them going through there, and you see the whales and the fish and the lightning and stuff when it shows, and they're right there in the wall, at the water, and they're going through there.
Poor whales
Huh?
are thinking, what the heck
Poor
is
whales
going
are
on?
saying, what in the heck is this?
Yeah, what is this? I thought we could go. Yeah.
Like there's glass there.
And in the Ten Commandments, they show a great thing. When I was in the Marine Corps, I got to go to Universal Studios, and they showed the place where they made the where the water split and stuff was a swimming pool. Okay. Over and showed how they did it, because everybody for a long time was like, how did they do that? You know, and they kind of showed us how they did it, which was really neat, all the different things they had there that they did for the Ten Commandments, and for that particular scene, because it was beyond what other people had been able to do at that time and stuff. So it's really neat. And so, but yeah, the walls, and Israel goes through on dry ground, right? This is a picture of immersion. Remember what immersion is? Church calls it baptism. Immersion is going in as an old creature and coming out as a new creature. It's life. Went in as slaves, came out as free people, a free nation. Okay? And it's just like us. When we are immersed into Messiah, we were slaves, but we come out as free people. Okay? It's the same thing. So Israel was immersed and became a nation, a free people, no longer owned by Pharaoh and the Egyptians, all right? But now owned by God, the Redeemer, our Redeemer. Who is our Redeemer? God is our Redeemer. Who is Yeshua? He's our Messiah, okay? He's our anointed one, okay? He is the one who came to show us the way of what we need to do. And I know a lot of people, they read in where Yochanan the Immerser, John the Baptist, says to him when Yeshua comes, says, "Behold the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world." John is not using a picture of Passover at that point, okay? And it's not a literal claim that he's making. Yeshua is not an offering. He never was. We know that. He was never meant to be an offering. God does not accept human offerings, okay? Sacrifice, okay? But he was symbolically as a sacrifice. Yeshua doesn't meet any of the requirements for any of these things. And when we take a look at what, even of a sin offering, really there's no, in the Hebrew, all the offerings, none of them were sin offerings. They were purification offerings. They were korban, meaning to draw close. They're a gift, which is to draw close to God. All these different sacrifices that are in there had nothing to do with sin per se, but with purification for us in order for us to draw near to God. What is it? God wants us to draw near to Him. But with sin and stuff, we can't draw closer to Him. And so God set up all these different things for people: voluntary offerings, peace offerings, or purification or sin offering. When we have sinned, we come and know. But the one thing that God didn't give us was an offering for deliberate sin. Or we know it's wrong, we do it anyways. Okay? Deliberate sin. But that's what Yeshua does for us, is that through his resurrection, we now can be forgiven for deliberate sin. Okay? As well as all the other sins. As it says in the Talmud, it says that a righteous man can die for his generation, for the sins of his generation. But a truly righteous man can die for the sins of all generations. Okay? It's found in the Talmud. Don't ask me where right now. I have it, but because we've looked at it, read it. And that's what Yeshua was. He was a truly righteous man. Why? Because he was perfect in what he did, in his walk, in his teachings. But as I was saying, he was a Pharisee. That's why the Pharisees invited him to supper and stuff like that, and they talked with him and stuff like that. But they had everything perfect. Yeshua had things that trying to fix some of their ideas and stuff, and we do later see that that they did take the things that he said and fixed those things, including healing on the Sabbath. Hey, that's to save a life. You know, you just don't know. They used to not mix up medicine and stuff on the Sabbath because it was considered work. Well, now they do because it could be saving that person's life. And to save a life is more important than keeping the Sabbath, okay? Or any of the other things. It includes if all you have to eat is unclean animals and stuff, life is more important, so you eat it, okay? Yeah.
It's even more important to save the life of an animal on the Sabbath.
Yeah, and Yeshua even gives us, it's more important to save the life of an animal on Sabbath, you know? Like that shepherd who's lost his sheep, you know, he says to him, how many of you, if your sheep is lost on the Sabbath, is going to go out there and try and find them and bring them back, right? You know, so as Yeshua said, the Sabbath was given for man, not man for the Sabbath. And so to understand this is that, you know, we need life is more important. It doesn't mean that if somebody needs help moving and stuff like that on the Sabbath, okay, that's different. But hey, if it's a life or death thing, maybe. But if it is, I don't know. But yep, they have no choice because it's caused the animal to suffer, right? Yeah, you got to feed your animals. So right, so you got to do that stuff for feed your animals on the farm. You got to milk your cows and maybe your goats and stuff. Why? Because it can be harmful to them as well.
By the way, I think if you're looking for that particular verse, I know there's one that it talks about the red heifer, right? This is Moed Keton 28.
Ah. Okay.
So the death of a righteous person standing for the red heifer.
Yeah. And that's why we see in every generation there is a truly righteous, not like Yeshua, but a righteous person that seems to suffer. We always ask, why do they suffer? It's so that they are suffering for their people, for the people, for their people, for our people, for us, in that same sense. But the truly righteous person, which was Yeshua, came now and has done that for all of us. So, but before that, we've seen, you know, righteous people. It's like that saying, the good die young. You know, well, it's really referring to a righteous person. Many times a righteous person will die young, but he's dying. He is taking on himself the persecutions and the diseases and whatever else for his generation, and then he dies. But another one, God always raises up another one. Okay, and so we wonder why, you know, why we don't suffer sometimes when we should. Well, it's probably because somebody else suffered for us. In this sense, Yeshua suffered for us. Okay, and so Israel leaves. They sing a song after they see, you know, like Moses said, you'll not see the Egyptians anymore. Talking about that generation stuff. And some of the Egyptian bodies are washing up on shore because some of them didn't have armor. Most likely they were just your regular men with spears, which really didn't have any armor or anything like that, so they were able to float, you know. But your other ones, they had armor, so they sunk like lead, it says. Chariots sunk. And what's interesting is that like I said, they found at that spot that goes from the Sinai Peninsula to the Arabian Peninsula, chariots and chariot wheels and even swords and stuff, Egyptian. And even found Solomon had erected 2 pillars, one on one side, one on the other, telling the story of the crossing of the Red Sea. And they have found them. The one on the Egyptian side, the wind has wore it down, but the one they found in Saudi Arabia, took pictures of it and everything. And once Saudi Arabia found out about it, they cut it down. You know, and of course, allowed anybody from going over there to see anything. But so we do know that is there. Yep. Yep, you can't.
Explain that the wood, of course, is all rotted away, but what happens when the chariots went in and tipped over, or whatever they were, it was the coral that attach itself to the wood.
There's,
What you see. Little shapes with the axle and all that kind of stuff.
yep, yep,
And also they were found, was found, so a wheel, find a wheel. That time it was a ring of bronze.
Yes, there was
Yeah.
metal in the
So it was bronze.
yep.
state, but
There's metal, but the wood is gone, but you still see because of the coral and stuff, you still see the design of the wheels and even the chariot and swords and other things, even some of the armor and stuff that they had too, that the coral attached itself to. Anyways, the other thing is that God is taking care of Israel, and we see Israel, the people of Israel, they're complaining, right? They're complaining. And and Moses is saying, why are you complaining about me? It's God. He's taking care of us. Complain to him. It's God who's saying we need to have faith, right? Okay, well, we see that the two places where they're thirsting. They're dying of thirst, as they say, but they need water. And so they're at a place where the water it's a spring of water, but it's very bitter. Very bitter. I don't know if you've ever drank very bitter water, but it'll make you throw up, And I have up in Warren. My wife's aunt and uncle's house, it was so, they use it only for cooking stuff, but they use bottled water. Yeah, Northern Pine was another one. Oh yeah, it was very bad. And the way I learned about it, I learned the hard way because I didn't know. I didn't understand why they didn't drink water out of their faucet, especially when it was so cold. And I was out, had been working and stuff, and it was so hot, and I came in to get some water, and I felt that it was so cold, and I took a big swig, and everything came up. And Cheryl's aunt, Diana, says to me, no, don't drink that. Here, I got bottled water. Oh, now you tell me, But yeah, it was But here, God says, here's a piece of wood. Throw it in there. Is a piece of wood really going to make something sweet and able to be eaten? It's a miracle, right? It's not true. And that's what baffles the scientists. How, that can't be true. It's got to be. We got to be able to figure this out because there's got to be some type of logic to this. But it can't be that, right? Can't be explained by that. That's ridiculous. But the water became drinkable. And then they're out in the desert, and again, playing, hey, you're going to let us die of thirst here again? And so God says to him, and this is the picture we need to look at. He says, go to the rock, take your elders, take your stick that you used your staff to cause the water to become blood in Egypt, and strike the rock. Okay? And it gave forth water. And we don't hear about it again. We don't hear about any of them complaining about drinking and water and anything else like that until Miriam dies, which is later on. They're getting close to going into the land. And they're traveling all over the place. Rav Shaul says that rock followed them. That rock with the water followed them wherever they went. And that Rav Shaul equates it with the Messiah, the living water.
The first pet rock.
Yeah, first pet rock. And that Yeshua talks about many times, he talks about living water, especially like with the Samaritan woman. He says, I can give you water that is living water, and you won't thirst again, right? Referring to himself, but also Rav Shaul makes that connection about Yeshua and this rock that followed Israel in the wilderness, okay? Now when Miriam died, as we'll read later, the rock quit giving water, okay? And so now the people complain about water again. So God says, take Aaron and yourself and the staff, take the elders and go to this rock and talk to it. He didn't say hit it, he said talk to it. But the people made him so mad that instead of talking to it, he hit the rock twice, which ruined the picture that God was trying to into the promised land, because they caused the people to lose faith. And faith in what? No. Miriam didn't enter, Aaron didn't enter, and Moses didn't enter.
wholesale got sidetracked.
Yeah.
They got booted out.
Well,
Sorry, you're not
not booted out. Though they were welcome. They'll come in later, but, huh? They're just not able to go in because of what happened, right? They caused the people to miss the picture of God. Water, that rock, that first one, is the Messiah being struck. Okay, the Messiah was struck. That's what it says. The suffering servant, right? The first Messiah. The first time the Messiah came, he was the suffering Messiah, the suffering servant. And so he was struck down, as we read. The second time, though, that we read about it, Moses was supposed to talk to it because it already suffered. He's supposed to talk to him, give us to it, as God says, give water. He's supposed to say, give water, and he would give us water. But instead, he struck it again, ruining the picture. God was trying to say, here's your Messiah, and here's okay. The first time the Messiah came, he came to suffer in our place, okay, to die in our place. The second time he comes, he's going to take us bring us to the land of Israel, give us living water, okay? Don't have to suffer. He already suffered, right? And during the time that Yeshua was here, there was two thoughts about the Messiah. One was that there would be a Messiah that came twice, and the other one was that there would be two Messiahs, one that would suffer and one that would come later. And Yochanan the Immerser, John the Baptist, when he was in prison, sent his disciples to him and asked him, a lot of people don't understand it. A lot of people say, oh, John had doubts about Yeshua. No, he didn't. He knew who he was. But he also knew the teaching, that some of the teaching about one Messiah coming twice and one Messiah coming now and one coming later, different one, right? And so he just wanted to know, are you the one? Are you the Messiah, or are we looking for another one? You know, you're going to suffer that, we know that, but are we looking for another Messiah to come? And of course, Yeshua gives them the answer of the Messiah. Tell them, the sick are being healed, the lame are walking, the blind are seeing, and those with sara'at, leprosy, are being healed. Okay? So blessed is he who is not embarrassed, ashamed. Blessed he who is not ashamed. In me, or something like that, right? I can't remember. I have to find it again, but I know. But that's the thing, is that you know, and so it started out with Israel, with the apostles going with Israel, and then we see Kefa, Peter going to Cornelius. Vision, a dream of sheep coming down with unclean food on it, and the voice says, "Kill and eat." I've not eaten anything unclean ever. And it says, "What I've called clean, do not call unclean." Right? But he knows it's not literal. So what does it mean? Right? It had nothing to do with food, and he goes with Cornelius. God says to Cornelius, "Send two men to get Peter." So he sends the two men. They get there, and then they go back. God said, "Go with them," and so he goes with them. And when he gets there to Cornelius' place, he says, I know what the vision means now. Not to call Gentiles unclean who God has called clean. The God-fearers. Okay? They are able to enter the kingdom without becoming Jewish, without becoming proselytes. Okay? By taking hold of the promises, Cornelius and many other Gentiles, God-fearers, became part of Israel without being Jewish. Now, like I said, Israel, the Jews, do have to keep the Torah to the best of their ability, the whole thing as much, you know, and of course we know that most of the Torah is for the priesthood. You got stuff for the men and so forth. You got stuff that it's only in the land of Israel, and it's other anywhere. You know, I mean, it's divided into several different things. Even with the 10 utterances, a lot of people say, well, that's the moral law that we're supposed to keep today. But no, it's just part of the Torah. It's just able to know how to treat God, how to treat each other, how to treat our parents, and to have a relationship with people.
It's kind of an index too.
It's kind of an index, yeah, because all the laws can be divided into those into the 10 utterances.
I think I have
So-
that verse. My words of him, the Son of Man, will be ashamed of when he comes into his own glory. And holy angels.
Okay. What is that? What is that?
Sorry, that's Luke 9,
Luke 9,
26.
26. Okay. Thank you. Have right now is Israel is now going into the wilderness. They've now got the water that they're going to need. The rest of the wilderness. We're not going to hear about the cry about water anymore up until that other point, like I said. We'll hear other things. But as we coming up now, with next week we have the portion Yitro, which gets into the 10 utterances and their meaning. You know, most people just read them as 10 commandments. Of course, they separate the first utterance and divide the second, what they call commandment, into two different ones. But we'll correct that. But there's so much in there, and how it works together. It isn't just read up and down, it's read side to side. Each thing corresponds to another. And in our relationship with God and our relationship with other people. But as we think about this, you know, is that the Gentiles, the Jewish people have to realize that Yeshua is the Messiah too. You know. And that's coming, because that's what it says. Rabbi Paul even talks about that. You know, that is only temporary, because it's bringing something. It's what we refer to as the time of the Gentiles. And the time of the Gentiles in 1967 when Israel retook Jerusalem. And what that means is that the Gentiles would be in charge of what was going on in the community, okay? And then it says God will open his heart to his sons, and his sons will return to his heart, okay? Talking about Israel coming back, okay? And we see that with the Messianic movement, that we've got both Jews and Gentiles coming to realize how important God's Torah is in our own lives even today, and what Yeshua has done for us. Yeshua, like I was saying last week, is the living Torah. He is the word of Proverbs 8:23, the one whom God gave power, instruction, who God allowed to do the creation, as we read in John chapter 1. Okay? That Yeshua was the beginning of God's creating. From the very beginning, God chose for him a Messiah. Anything was ever else was built. And then he was, in a sense, he was there when God fashioned the four corners of the earth and the stars in the sky and so forth and so on. And it even goes on to say that at the end, that those who believe in him will be blessed, but those who do not will be crushed. Okay? And the idea is that we have freedom of choice, freedom of will. God has given that to us. But God gives us choices. And it's not God who makes the bad choices. We make the bad choices. That's why we need to look at these things and realize that God has given us opportunities. He gives us the opportunity to make the choices. And so, you know, the thing is, you know, you hear people say, well, God's going to send people to hell and stuff. God doesn't send people to hell. People send themselves because they reject God's instructions. God told Israel, I lay before you life and death, blessing and curse. Choose life. Choose blessing. So what's the opposite of blessing? It's curse. What's the opposite of life? It's death, right? It's the law of opposites. Okay? That's the law of opposites. We choose. If we choose, like it says in the that movie, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, and that Nazi guy takes the wrong cup and he drinks it, and the Crusader says, what we see there is that he made a choice, not with all the information he had, but with what he thought he knew, and he died. He chose poorly, right? And with the information that Indiana Jones had and realized, oh, wait, it wouldn't be something like that. He knew which one it was, and he chose the right one with knowledge, right? God gives us knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, but we need to, study it, to get an understanding of who God is and what he desires for us, to make the right choice. But it's up to us. He's not going to make us do anything. Okay? Yeah.
I like that you bring that up, that the Nazi takes the most ornate
Yeah.
and awesome.
Yeah, the Nazi, the most beautiful and, yeah,
But
worthy of a king.
worthy of a king, right. But the cup, the right
Just a
humility is
common wooden
humble
cup. Yep, a common wooden cup. That's all it was. Yep. Yep. So, as we go this week, think about it. What is the choice we have before us? What is God laying before us? And how can we get to that point? How can we begin to walk in that? It's prayer and study. It's having love for God, knowing all the things that we have been through. God has brought us to this point today. Many of us have been close to death in many different ways, and we didn't even know it maybe. Some of us did know it. Other things, tragedy, we crippled, stuff like that, when we don't realize that God has drawn us and brought us to this day today. So it's kind of like Yeshua says, today, choose today. Choose for you this day whom you shall follow. How's it go? Serve. As for me and my house, will serve the Lord. That was Joshua. Joshua, Yeshua, same type of name. Just two different people. Anyways, the thing is that it's for us to choose today. I know I've heard people say, well, tomorrow I'm going to do what I'm doing now, and then before I die, I'll choose. Well, even in the scripture, God says that won't happen. You won't be given a choice at that time. It'll never be there. You need to do it now, but all the just believing that Yeshua, accepting him as God's Messiah, and that he died in our place, so that not that we can go to heaven, we're not talking about that, but that we can be saved for the world to come, to live in the 1,000-year reign with him, and to be a part of the world to come that comes after that, the 8th day. So as we're going through that, just think about that. As we're going this week, think about that. And if you have questions, call me or Cheryl or my mom and dad or my mother-in-law or Ben or anybody, really,
Not your children.
my children are still learning. They're still learning. Some of them know. No, my children are great. I love them. My grandchildren are great too. And that's what we're trying to do is raise our children, raise our grandchildren in the right way to go. The way to walk. Halakha. Okay? So
Remember, we're all learning.
we're all learning. Hey, I'm not there either. I only have maybe a little bit more understanding of stuff, but I still lack in other places. So, don't take my word for it. Check it out yourself. That's what we need to know. I give you a little bit. Hopefully you'll go with that and find out more, right?
Yeah, and if you're interested in that part you were talking about with the death of the righteous person, it is Moed Katan 28.
Moed Katan. Moed Katan.
Moed Katan
Moed Katan.
28A4.
28A4. Okay, that's where it talks about the righteous.
In
Dying
regard to
for-
the death of Aaron and the death of Miriam.
Okay, the death of Aaron and Miriam. So, okay, thank you. All right, so we'll go ahead and recite the priestly blessing. Our God and God of our fathers, bless us with the threefold blessing in the Torah written by the hand of Moses, your servant, and pronounced by Aaron and his sons, the priests, your holy people, as it is said. May the Lord bless you and protect you. May the Lord make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. May the Lord turn his face toward you and grant you peace. Yevarecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'yichunecha. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha. Shalom. Have a peaceful rest of Shabbat. Have a peaceful week this week. Tuesday night Torah Club at 7. Wednesday night study at 7. I think it's in March is Purim, and then April is Passover. So as we get closer, we'll let everybody know. We'll have a Purim party here. Be able to dress in your costumes and have a good time. Read the story of Esther, and then Passover comes a month after that. So other than that, I think that's it. So Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom. Good Shabbos. Have a good week. Shavuot Tov.